happy to be here this week because this week I am much better than I was last week. And I have probably most of the voice, although not all of it. I've got most of it back, and I'm glad to have most of it back. Today we will look at Jesus, the Good Shepherd. This passage is such a part of who we are as Christians that just about every church I've ever been in has a Good Shepherd window somewhere. You know, a stained glass window with Jesus holding a lamb over his shoulder and tending the sheep. Especially for us clergy, this passage is a bit of a struggle because sometimes people confuse us with Jesus. I don't think that's very easy to do, but as you think about it, I get called a lot of things in this job. I get called Father Ed, I get called Mr. Pickup, I get called Reverend Ed. Sometimes I get called Parson. And occasionally I even get called Mr. Ed, which some of us will remember, as the talking horse. But my very least favorite thing to be called is pastor. Now that may strike you as strange, but pastor is a term of respect, and especially when somebody who's a Lutheran or Roman Catholic calls you that, because that's what they're taught to call their pastors. But it's such a tough term for me to hear, because the origin of the word pastor, you see, pastor is the Latin word for shepherd, and there's only one good shepherd, and it ain't me, There's only one real great shepherd, and it's not me. And so even though clergy are often called the shepherds of our flocks, I think it's the wrong metaphor for a clergy person. As our passage points out, Jesus is the Good Shepherd. He says, I am the Good Shepherd. The first thing to notice are the words, I am. All throughout the Gospel of John, in fact, 7 times, Jesus uses the phrase, I am, to connect himself with God the Father, Yahweh, whose very name, we are told, which he tells Moses on Mount Sinai, means I am. So in all of these passages that Jesus says, the 7 of them, when he uses I am, he is saying that he's the same stuff, the same personality, the same being as God the Father. Jesus says, I am, over and over again. The bread of life, I'm the vine, you are the branches. I'm the door of the sheep, I'm the living, the water. I'm the way and the truth and the life. I am the door for the sheep, and now I am the Good Shepherd. In all of these ways, using all of these different metaphors, Jesus is telling us that he is a chip off the old block. He's exactly the same thing as God the Father, the same substance, or in Greek, which we fought over for years as we developed the creed, homoousia, the same substance as the Father. When Jesus claims to be the Good Shepherd, he uses the word kalos, which we translate as good. By the way, Bible study class, I messed up last week. I thought the word in Greek was alethenos, but alethenos is true, as in I am the true vine and you are the branches and so on. But it's a similar kind of thing. Kalos in Greek, as opposed to kakos. We get our word kaka from kakos, bad, the bad stuff. Kalos is the good. And kalos in Greek means all of these things. It means all of these words in English. Model, ideal, perfect, beautiful, precious, excellent, competent, praiseworthy, noble, and good. Think about that. Jesus, not only the Good Shepherd, he's the model shepherd for all shepherds. He's the ideal shepherd, the perfect shepherd, the one that's just beautiful, does a beautiful job of it, the one who is precious and excellent and competent and praiseworthy and noble and good. So Jesus is really saying, I am all of these things. I'm the ideal, the perfect. Pay attention to who I am, Jesus tells us, and learn what it means to be a shepherd. So all of us, not just the clergy, but all of us, are supposed to pay attention to how Jesus is the model for all shepherding, for all taking care of others, and how we lesser shepherds model what we do to take care of one another based on Jesus. Frankly speaking, I've never saved anybody's soul. I've never done it. That's Jesus' job, not mine. He does that, not me. He's the ideal shepherd. And no matter how hard we try or how hard we clergy and laity work together, all of us other shepherds fall short of being like he is. So, if we clergy are not the shepherd of our flock, if we're not the pastor, who are we? It's clear that the followers of Jesus are the sheep of his flock. So we know who the lay people are in this metaphor, but in this pastoral story of sheep and shepherds, where do the clergy fit? Where do the clergy fit? Some years ago, I was working on a women's Crucio weekend. There were 57 women and me. You know, for most of you men, that would be a wonderful thing. For me, it was just more girls, you know. Needless to say, I had a wonderful time with the women. Women are great times. They took over not only the women's room in the facility, they took over the men's room too. And I had to make an appointment to go, you know, and station somebody outside the door. Anyhow, one of the other clergy on the weekend, the Reverend Marnie Schneider from St. Thomas in Chesapeake, said that another priest had once told her, you know, Marnie, we clergy are not really the shepherds of our flock. Jesus tells us that there's one shepherd and one flock. We know that that's Jesus. So this other clergy told Marnie that he had figured out that we clergy are the sheepdogs. We are. Well, Marnie loves dogs as much as I do. She has a particularly sweet rescue dog named Sadie, who is the light of her life. And on the back of Marnie's car is a bumper sticker that reads, "Oh God, help me to become the person my dog thinks I am." You know, that's the kind of person Marnie is. You who love dogs understand this. So think about us clergy being sheepdogs for a moment. Think of what a sheepdog does. The sheepdog runs around the flock, trying to keep the sheep from wandering off. Yeah, that's me. The sheepdog nips at the heels of the sheep who aren't doing what they're supposed to do. Well, sounds like me too. The sheepdog sort of rounds up the sheep and nudges them onward in the direction that the shepherd wants them to go. Yep, I hope that's me. Sheepdogs are kind of pushy about doing their jobs if you've ever watched them. In fact, they're real pushy. And the sheepdog works hard to do all this ministry to preserve the safety of the sheep and to please the shepherd. I hope that's me too. But the sheepdog is never the shepherd. Never. There's only one completely authentic, model, ideal, perfect pastor, and that's Jesus. He's the one who paid the price. All the rest of us are something short of that. And perhaps even though Jesus is the model and it's our deepest desire to be like him, we can never expect to be entirely like him. To some extent, All the rest of us clergy are hired hands, even though we throw our hearts into it as best as we can. We will never make, most of us will never make the ultimate sacrifice of our lives. This week I was thinking about clergy who made the ultimate sacrifice of their life, and I think of someone who probably no one in this room has ever heard of. His name was the Reverend William N. Jackson, and he was the rector of St. Paul's Church in downtown Norfolk in the 1850s, when a ship docked in Norfolk that had mosquitoes on board from Central America who carried a yellow fever epidemic. And Norfolk was smitten with yellow fever. Everybody ran for cover. They didn't know what to do about it then, so people fled Norfolk, headed west. Jackson sent his family away from Norfolk for safety, but he himself stayed behind, taking care of his parishioners. It's said that he went to church in the daytime to bury the adults, and then went home at night to play with their children. Isn't that something? Isn't that a job description? When his house became too small for all the kids who became orphaned because of the yellow fever epidemic, he moved with them to the parish hall of St. Luke's Church, because St. Paul's Church didn't have a parish hall. So they went to St. Luke's and moved in. After 2 months of this grueling work, he himself contracted yellow fever and died. And the children that he took in became the beginnings of the Episcopal Orphanage in Norfolk, which is now known as the Jackson Field Home for Girls to this day. Now, someone like William Jackson was a wonderful sheepdog. He was a fabulous sheepdog, taking care of his flock and fighting off the wolf as best as he was able. He came mighty close to being a pastor. Now, I'll tell you a little secret about us sheepdogs. All of us clergy who are hired hands have some time over our careers when we consider running away when the wolf comes. For me, that time was back in 1999. After Hurricanes Dennis and Floyd passed through the little church that I served in Virginia, the church was flooded. It became under more than 4.5 feet of water, and that water sat there for 2 solid weeks. It wasn't like it came and it went. It just sat there, and it was full of petroleum and disgusting. Our telephones all went out because the telephone exchange flooded. It was underwater too. And nobody was able to call their families. And I had elderly people who were stuck in their homes, who couldn't really get out, who needed to tell their children that they were okay, even though they couldn't call them and tell them. So I went over to Cape Charles, over the bay, because our flood was localized and the phones over in Cape Charles weren't. Anyhow, on the Monday after the flood, September the 20th of 1999, I was coming back home, and as I was coming home, I was on the bypass that goes around Franklin, and it was time to take the exit and go home. And I had this horrible temptation in me. Just keep on going, Ed. Just keep on going west. You don't have to go back and do all that. You don't have to face all the stuff ahead of us. I mean, our church was underwater. We couldn't even get to it. There were New Jersey barriers keeping us from going downtown where the flood was. So I had that temptation to run away, to be the hired hand and run away when the sheep get in trouble. I had that temptation. And a parishioner of mine then told me that at the same time, her sister's minister in the little Baptist church in eastern North Carolina did exactly what I was tempted to do. He ran off and left his flooded church behind. and his people to take care of it. I can't condemn him. In fact, I understand the temptation completely, and even thought about it myself before I took that exit and went home. Of course, I did take the exit and went into town, and we busted our buns to get our little church put back together again, to rip out the walls and all the Sunday school classrooms and dry the place out and pump the water out. Anyhow, my point is this. No matter how much of us hired hands or sheepdogs really love our sheep, and we do, there comes a time and a price and a danger that we don't want to face, and we're likely to run off like the hired hand. Both the sheep and the sheepdogs follow the shepherd. Both the sheep and the sheepdog look to the shepherd for guidance and correction and wisdom and protection and leadership. I'm your sheepdog, and if I occasionally might nip at your heels, it's because I'm trying to keep you going in the right direction. I really am. And at the end of the day, sometime in the probably not too distant future now, when I can no longer serve a flock of sheep, my deepest desire as the sheepdog is to curl up by the shepherd next to the fire, to lie down, to get a little scratch behind the ears, and hear Jesus say, "Ooh, you are a good boy." You know, that's what I want at the end of it all. And my other deepest hope is to love Jesus with the same simple devotion, with the same purity of heart, and with the same utter determination to do what pleases him, as any good old dog might do. So, woof, woof people, and amen.
Amen.